Metal Jesus here, and I'm back again with another video comparing the Japanese covers of games to the North American counterpart. And this video is going to focus on the Japanese Super Famicom versus our Super Nintendo. Now, the reason why I chose that is because often the covers are very different, and specifically it's because the packaging was pretty different. The Japanese covers were long. They kind of remind me of, I guess, VCR covers, where in North America we tilted them on our sides, made them a little bit fatter. And so I think when game developers were bringing over games from Japan to North America, they had to sort of rethink the covers a bit. And man, I'll tell you what, some of the differences are crazy. Let's take a look. I'm going to start this video off right by showing one of the most notorious examples of East versus West. Yes, I'm talking about the shooter called Phalanx. Now, when you look at the Super Famicom version, it all makes sense. You've got a futuristic spaceship with this kind of really weird green thing on the front, but at least it looks like a shooter. There's explosions, there's a spacecraft. And then you get to the North American version. When they brought the game over, the developers have admitted that they were going for something original. That was their plan here. And yeah, they succeeded. I don't know what they were thinking, trying to put a guy on the cover of a shooter sitting down playing the banjo with overalls and a fedora. It's the weirdest cover ever. And I don't know, I kind of like it. Here's a role-playing game on the Super Famicom called Mother 2. Now, it may not look familiar to a lot of gamers because, well, it wasn't even called this in North America. We remember the game as Earthbound. And I have to say that I definitely prefer the Super Nintendo version over the Super Famicom version, just because I think the Earthbound cover is so much more interesting, so much more colorful. It just looks like a game I would want to play. Here is one of the most iconic Super Nintendo covers of all time. Pretty much everyone who had that console played this game. But in Japan, it had a much, much different cover, as well as a different name. It was actually called the Triforce of the Gods. Here's a pretty cool shooter called Gun Force. This is the North American cover. But man, check out the Super Famicom version. This looks awesome. I don't know if it's based on an anime or manga, but I definitely like it a lot more. Here's a Super Nintendo cover that a lot of fans like me love and admire. This was such a great game. I still love Super Metroid quite a bit. Now, the Super Famicom version is very similar. Samus is definitely in a similar pose, but it has a different vibe to it. There's a little bit more depth to the cover. So it's hard to say which one's better, but I like them both. Here's another shooter called Area 88. This is based on a popular anime and manga series. And I really like this one a lot. It kind of reminds me of Star Blazers a little bit with the character designs. Looks really exciting. Looks like it's got a Harrier jet and, you know, it looks like a shooter. But when they brought it over to North America, they really emphasized the military aspect here, in my opinion. I think it looks much more serious and definitely much more kind of westernized with the helmet on, and also the F-15s in the back. So it's a cool cover, but I think I probably prefer the Super Famicom version. Here is the very first Final Fantasy game that I ever owned and ever played, and that is the masterpiece Final Fantasy III. And I gotta say, this cover it's okay, but it's not nearly as great as the game it's based on. And that would be Final Fantasy VI. Look at that cover. Oh my God. I mean, it's almost like no comparison. Final Fantasy VI on the Super Famicom is gorgeous. Here's another popular Super Nintendo game a lot of racing fans played for hours and hours. Of course, I'm talking about FZero. And a lot of people like me recognize this. I actually have the original in my collection. But check it out. Here's the Japanese version, which is a very different take on it. It looks almost more hand-drawn, kind of organic, cartoony looking. Here's a Super Famicom game called Devil's Castle Dracula. It might look kind of familiar. And check out that dude in the middle of the cover there. Doesn't it look like he and I should probably like start up a heavy metal band or something? And of course, this game is more familiar to us as Super Castlevania 4. I have to say that I like this cover much, much better, even though it doesn't have a heavy metal dude on the cover. Here's the cover to Star Fox, which is a cover that a lot of us remember fondly, but check out the Super Famicom version. This cover is very similar in tone and style, but I like how they show the other characters. Here is the North American cover for Megaman X. This is a really cool cover. And in Japan, it's called Rockman X. And again, much different in tone and style. Chrono Trigger is one of my all-time favorite role-playing games, and here is the Japanese Super Famicom version. But this is the cover that I'm used to. And you know, it's hard to say which one I like more because this one's a little bit more of an action shot, but I like how on the Japanese one, it's almost more about the characters. In Japan, they had a Contra game called Contra Spirits, but when they brought it over to North America, they renamed it and also gave it a new cover. I, of course, know this game as Contra 3: The Alien Wars, one of my favorite Contra games for sure. And the covers are very different, both in style and tone. It's hard to say which one I like best, but I kind of lean towards the North American one. So that's a quick look at Japanese covers versus the North American counterparts. I hope you enjoyed that. In my last video, a lot of people pointed out that often the European covers are exactly the same as the Japanese covers, and I just didn't know that. That's really fascinating. You know, speaking of which, I don't really collect a lot of import games, and you know, I've only maybe got, I think, 5 Super Famicom games. And so I have a question for you big import collectors out there, specifically for the Super Nintendo and the Super Famicom. I want to know, what Super Famicom games do you think would be good for me to collect? And specifically what I mean is that I don't have to know Japanese to enjoy them. That's kind of what I'm looking for. So I'd love to know, because sometimes the Japanese versions of games are cheaper than what they would cost us if we got the Super Nintendo version. So love to know what you think. Let me know which ones you think should be in my collection. As always, I want to thank you for watching my channel and thank you for subscribing. Take care.